Today, I'm sitting down with Chris Gerardi for a conversation that's as much about personal growth as it is about real estate and investing. Chris shares his incredible stories of living in the countryside while managing properties, business, and his horses, and how he's come to see homes as more than just financial assets. They're a place of love and connection. We'll talk about the emotional side of investing, the pain and the faith it takes to grow, and why leaning into challenges often leads to the biggest rewards. Plus, we dive into how community and service can reshape the way we think about real estate. If you're ready for some powerful insights on wealth, growth, and finding purpose in what you do, you won't want to miss this one. Let's get started. How many hours a day do you think it's taking you just to maintain your property, maintain the horses? I mean, I know
Oh,
horses is a
yeah,
lot
for
of work,
sure.
dude.
Yeah, this property is, I would say, four hours a day of maintenance, probably easily 4 hours a day. Um, in the summers, it's a lot more. Obviously, when winter comes, I don't have near as much. But once summer comes, man, I've got pasture land. I've got there's always horses do a number on everything, right? They just destroy stuff. So there's always like fixing. I mean, I think last year I was into the six figures of just maintenance on this property, the low six-figure range. Um, so what a lot of people don't realize is like when you want these properties that have horses, have stables, all these different things, they kind of neglect to. They think about the purchase price, but they don't think about like, hey, you're buying like a leaky bucket no matter what. I mean, it's part of the deal. It's great because it's like my kids can run around, they can do stuff, they can, I have room for the dogs and all that. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of work, and I have a couple people that help me all summer. I have a handyman that's around, it seems like all the time. And it's just, if it's not fencing getting repaired, it's the riding ring, it's something in the stables, it's something in the house. I mean, it's honestly overwhelming to a large degree. I think that's why a lot of people, you know, years ago when there was that transition from the country into the city, there,
Mhm.
the country life is difficult. So like out here, we get snow, but we'll get winds that are 70, 80 miles per hour. In the winter, they'll put 10-foot drifts over your road. I mean, the only way you're moving out of that is with a bobcat, right? Like you have no way to access even a dirt road. And that's if they ran, the grader through the dirt road, which usually takes 2 or 3 days. So you may have no way out of your property for a week. I mean, it happens. And so I think that transition in how hard it was even, 80, 60 years ago, people wanted to move to the cities, easier, more access. Here it's like my wife and I, and like later today, we'll make a trip into Omaha, which is about 2 hours south of us. And that's just to get groceries because there's
Wow.
no really good grocery stores out here. So we like to eat healthy. So that whatever meats we don't get locally, we go there to get groceries, usually like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, one of the two. And every time we go in there, they're like, "Are you guys preparing for an apocalypse?" And we're like, "We're here every 2 weeks." It's kind
This
of
is going to get us for the next 2 weeks.
yeah. I'm like, "We'll be back in 2 weeks to get more stuff." But yeah, it's a transition, and I think a lot of people are kind of after 2020, people started to kind of move out to some of the more rural areas and wanted to kind of become more at one with the land. But with that, there's a lot of drawbacks, and I think people underestimate the amount of work, even in modern day with modern equipment, that goes into maintaining any type of acreage property, whether it's small, medium, or large.
I would like to explore that with you. So, you're the owner of Realbrick. So you mainly, if I'm correct, invest in real estate. And, the modern ethos currently is that real estate never goes down. It's always a quote unquote passive investment vehicle. And from what you just said there, obviously your home is not an investment. It is your primary home, but it takes time, effort, consistent work. Do you find that it's the same for people that will typically go into real estate and trying to purchase homes if they're not doing fractional ownership? Or
Yeah, I
even if
mean,
they
I
are?
think I think that people look at things kind of in a altered way. I think as a society, we've kind of gotten to a point where we look at our homes as a bank, the homes, our residences that we live in, right? And I think that's really I don't think it's really the best way to look at it. Once again, these are just my opinions, right? I don't have every answer by any means, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world. But what I've realized is, you know, investment properties are investment properties, right? Those are properties you invest in for return yearly. Those are properties you invest in for an uplift, in equity, generally speaking. And I think that people have gotten to a point where they are like, hey, I'm going to move into this house, and this is going to become my bank and my bread and butter. And I think sometimes that's the wrong way to look at these things. For me, it's when you're managing a residence, a single family home in a neighborhood. Of course, your costs are significantly lower than what they would be for me, right? Like if you're trying to race to the top in equity on an acreage property, that's probably not the fastest way to do it, because you're going to spend a lot of money in maintenance, and that will impact your total when you sell. And so I think people kind of look at their homes as in that light, and they're like, hey, I've got all this equity. But what they have to realize is that equity is illiquid in a lot of senses, unless they're taking it out in maybe some type of a loan format, right? Well, then you're paying interest on that loan. You're basically borrowing equity in your home, paying interest on it. And when you really start to look at the numbers from a non-biased way, you'll see that that's not always really the best way to do it. And I think what people have to really realize is our homes are places where we live. Um, they're not cash registers. We should never look at our home as a cash register. That is my personal opinion. I look at the property that I live in, and I think to myself, like, I'm going to be here. I have no intent of selling. This particular property, since I've purchased it, has gone up, believe it or not, 70%, which is
Wow.
insane. Um, and, you know, I don't ever look at it and go, that's my money to play with. Or I look at it, I'm like this home I want to have in my family, and it's hands off for me. It doesn't matter if it went up 10,000%. That's not the way I look at it. I look at investments as like investments in rentals, right? Those are investments. Investments in certain markets. Those are investments. People have to really, and I think the middle class gets really pulled into this world of, hey, the prices of our homes are going up. There's equity available. Let's do. Okay, we're gonna do an addition. We're gonna buy a boat. All these like crazy things, right? And I think um, we do ourselves an injustice and our families an injustice by looking at things from that perspective. I think we have to look at things from the non-emotional perspective, and I think that's one of the biggest struggles for people when they invest in anything. Most people invest very emotionally. And what I have learned over the years is, and I started investing, when I was 19, I did my first E-Trade transaction. It was back in the day when E-Trade was like new. And I
Hmm.
remember buying stock with this crazy, and I thought, this is crazy. Um, but what I've realized over the years of investing in things is people are very much emotionally based. And probably one of the biggest wins for me is I don't let the emotion interfere with the logic of what's really going on. And I think if you're using your home as a bank of any sort, your home is an emotional place for you. There's an emotional connection, and that is why you bought it. And that is the fundamental reason why you should never utilize it as a means to money if you can do that, right? So I'm more of a believer in, if you're gonna, you have to weigh the options very clearly. Now, I mean, there are people who've taken money out on their homes and they've used it to create businesses and been very successful. That to me is a very logical move. If you believe that your success is going to outperform your debt, and you are, once again, everybody believes this in the beginning. They're like, oh yeah, I could definitely do it. But you have to really do the numbers and really get down to it and go, can we do that? Can we actually do that? And if you can, and you're looking at it logically and not emotionally and willing to say no to yourself if it's not going to make sense, then it could be a very smart move. But I think those moves have to be very calculated, very, very calculated, opposed to, I'm going to take out a loan, I'm going to buy a rental property and see how it performs, get some cash flow. I'm gonna tighten up my performance on it, move to the next one, do the same thing, rinse and repeat. But what inevitably will happen is, before you know it, once you get a portfolio of say 4 or more rental homes, it starts to turn on into a real job. And
Mm-hmm.
now you're working 40, 50 hours a week, maintaining all these different things, including your own lifestyle, right? And so that becomes a drag and a burden. And I think people severely underestimate that. And I think that's why, really, for Real Bricks, it's kind of a merger in the middle where it's like, hey, you can invest in these rentals, you can get dividends. Like today, dividends were dispersed, or everybody got notification who invests on the platform that they're getting dividends in the next few days. It tells them how much, and I think the dividends were like almost 9.5%, and so that'll get dispersed into their not bank, but into their profile immediately, their account, and they can transfer that into their bank account, or they can put it into another property. But it's really up to them. But when that comes through, you're like, wow, I invested in this real estate. It literally took me 7 minutes or less from start to finish to sign up, to get my bank account, and to actually swipe and invest. And all I had to do was sit on it for 3 months, and I got a return. Now, that return might not be 70% like Bitcoin. However, Bitcoin is a speculative asset, and there's a huge difference between speculation and just raw data, you know. And so I think that is, inherently why I wanted to build this platform, because I've been a speculative investor for years, but I'm also a person who can deal with loss. Not very many people can deal with loss, because there have been many times where I've taken loss to significant degrees. Losses that would make people, like, change the way they live to a large degree. I think that's part of anybody's journey who's gonna be a large risk taker, to be willing to do that. So
So
go ahead.
let me
Yeah.
ask you this. I definitely want to get into Real Bricks in the
Yeah.
company that you run, but before we get there, you've mentioned a few times your ability to be unemotional, and I think that's one of the hardest things that people do when they look at personal finance. They're thinking about the finance side, but they forget about the personal side of personal finance, which is, I would say, 80% of actually being good with your money. So too many people that go through life, when I call it the feelings of finance, I feel like I should be able to do this with my money, but they don't actually look at the physics of finance. What are the actual data show, the numbers, the actual thing that is truth? How have you been able to cultivate that, or is that something that you had immediately to be able to detach from yourself, from your investments, to be able to see it from like a 10,000-foot view and not get your emotions bought in? Like you said there, you said you shouldn't maybe mess with your house and playing with equity there because that's your livelihood. Like that's an emotional component. But in addition to that, your money is an emotional component. We trade our life energy for money. So we're trading our life. The one renewable resource no one has is time, for money. How were you able to detach that emotion of watching your money, go up and down, up and down? That's your life, going up and down, up and down.
Yeah. So that's a great question. Um, for me, my journey's probably been a little bit different than a lot of people. It may be very similar to a lot of people, but and I really try to let people know genuinely that everybody's journey is different. We're not all the same, and I say that with real reality. I think as a culture, as a people, we're taught that we have to look at things all in a certain way, and I think it's really destructive to us as individuals and to us as a culture. When I say a culture, I mean people, humanity. You know, we may have grown up in, Chris, your name's Chris, my name's Chris, but we may have grown up in different places.
Hmm.
But ultimately, most of us want the same thing. You know, we want the same thing, and we want to see that we want to plant seeds and we want to see them grow. That's it, right? And that's an investment. So for me, the way I look at investments is I look 5 years out. When I started this platform, I looked 5 years out, and today where we're at, I'm looking 5 years out. And so if I'm going to invest in something, I go, where is this going to be in 5 years? If I look at the trajectory, and this is a lot of this is just faith. You know, people I think that have been very successful in their endeavors sometimes for may not talk about that portion. But what I've realized is faith is one of the most important pieces to investing, to creating, to winning, to all of it. You have to understand and be prepared that you will lose. You will take losses, you will take blows, and that's part of life. That's just how it is. But if you have faith that no matter what, you're going to figure it out, and believe me, I mean, when I tell people, if you have faith that you're going to figure it out, you will figure it out. I'm proof positive of this. There are many people outside of in this world that are proof positive of this. If you have faith, you will find a way to win. And so I look at things and I go, what does this look like? I honestly, I look at the numbers, sure. And I might look at some graphs and go, okay, I think this is going to go this way. And then I'll sit down and I'll visualize where it sounds crazy, but I'll close my eyes, I will visualize and go, where is this going to be in 5 years? Um, and if it makes sense in my brain, then I'm like, this is a risk I'm willing to take. I have full faith this is going to pan out this way. And a lot of that is just kind of trying to determine what people's we look at the world of finance and we look at the world of what's going on in the economy, and we look at people's habits and how those finances impact, which is energy, how that energy, lack of energy, more energy. Money is energy. You're absolutely
Hmm.
100% right. In which is one of the big reasons why I wanted to create Real Bricks, is because I got into Bitcoin in 2015, give or take. It was like $234 a Bitcoin. Most people I talked to had no clue what it was. It took me 4 years to get my mother invested, but I had so much excitement about it. But then what I realized was, wait a minute, we're just storing our energy in something.
Hmm.
And if we're all putting our energy in this, it's telling me that we can't find something better to put our energy in. That is inherently scary. What that leads to is a world where if it's easier for us to just throw our money in this and to get a gain, Bitcoin is not producing anything. Bitcoin is not creating anything. Bitcoin is not an entrepreneur. Bitcoin is not going to take action. I think that that is really the way that I look at things and go, where are things going to go? And what I've realized is when in 2019, I knew we were moving in a shift, and I didn't know to what degree. I couldn't have told anyone specifically how that was going to pan out. I did not know 2020 was going to happen with COVID, but I knew we were shifting, and I knew that shifting was happening. And I knew that when I understood Bitcoin in these alternative assets that were digital, I said to myself, why not just make a digital asset that is actually tangible? Why
Hmm.
not create that for people that works? And in real estate was very clear to me that we were going through a process, and I took a bet on it, and I said, what's this look like 5 years out? I took a bet to build this out. It's cost millions of dollars. I've had to go through endless amounts of headaches to get through just all of it, right? And now I'm looking at it going, what's 5 years look like? Holy cow. I think I have a pretty good idea now. And I think that I was right about 5 years ago, my projection to today. I wasn't exact, but I'm pretty close. And so a lot of it has been very much look at the things around you, try to open your mind and know that confines don't exist. They only exist in your brain. And when you can break them down and wreck them, man, you can make some amazing projections that you thought you could never make.
Now, you mentioned it, so I'd like to touch upon it for our audience members, because we have these many selves within us, right? We have the experiencing self, that's the us right now, who's actually communicating. Then there's the narrative self, there's the meta self, there's all these different selves. And it sounds like what most people do, they go through their whole life believing that the experiencing self, what is going to me right now, whatever I'm feeling, whatever emotions happening to me, that is truth. That's what reality is. And what I'm hearing, what you're saying is you've been able to realize that, yes, this experiencing self is real, but also the narrative self, this person that I want to be in 5 years, that person is also real. So when you're dealing with your business, when you see something 5 years out and you know, like, this is the vision that I believe it's going to get to. And if it doesn't get there the way that I see it, I have the ability in my brain to go ahead and make that reality by doing whatever conscious effort it is. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. How are you able to make that connection and realize that, yes, in the future, that's going to be the way that it's going to be. And in the short term, I'm going to have to deal with a lot of volatility. Experiencing me is going to have to suffer so that narrative me, future me, can be happy.
Yeah. So, I think the ability to take on punishment is part of it. Um, I think, a lot of people, as people, we don't like pain, whether it's emotional or physical. We don't like pain because pain doesn't feel good and it makes you move, right? So, what I've realized is pain through a process or process of pain is one of the biggest benefits for me. Um, Pain is what motivates me to continue to move. And the more pain that I'm in, the more anguish that I'm in, the more that I know I'm going the right way. Now, for everyone, that's different. But what I've realized is if I'm taking a risk and I'm going through pain, the risk is most likely going to pay off. But if I'm not going through pain, then I don't believe I'm in the right risk. That's what I've realized. So if you think of it as like a tack on a chair, if you're going and you're sitting on 10 different chairs and 3 of them have tacks, the ones with tacks, are, if you look at it from investments, are most likely going to be the winners. They're going to be difficult. They're going to take bandwidth. They're going to take time, and they're going to take effort. And, everybody just wants to take the easy road overall because our brains are wired to take the path of least resistance, just like water, right? But with that, we have to be willing to tolerate pain and endure to create something bigger than us. And when I say that, I think what I've realized through this journey is if I'm going through some pain and it's difficult for me to make an investment win, I'm going through the effort to get it there. In that process, I'm helping people indirectly without even realizing it. And so that has become a very fundamental principle for me as a person is I want to create things that people can build upon. I want them to be able to create brick by brick, and we build and we unify and we create something that's bigger than us that can provide for more than just one of us. I think I've gone through life and I get very, I'm out in the country, right? Like I don't have cable. I mean, I have a TV, but I don't watch cable. I don't watch a lot of this stuff because what I've realized is the more information that I listen to that's outside of my own mental guidance, the more cluttered and the more wrong choices are made. You can go to people and you can ask them for answers, or you can ask them for maybe some things that they've done, wisdom. But not everybody's answers are going to fit your profile because everybody's profile is different. But if we're all working to create a better good for others, you will win. A byproduct will be you winning. If you are going to go out and you're going to invest in rentals yourself and you want to grow that, what should really be your number one philosophy there? As much as the average person is going to go make money, I would say, how about making sure that the people you put in there are great people, How about making sure that you're supporting those renters? How about being there and being a support for them in their level up of life? And what you will get is a larger return on your investment, because if you make personal connections with these people that matter and you're helping them, you're providing them a home, and you make that connection, they're going to take care of that home. They're going to let you know prior, hey, I think something's up. Come check this out. I don't want it to. They're going to do all these things because they're going to think about you and you're thinking about them. And so when you work together, all tides, when the tide rises, all boats rise. But I think inherently what we've seen is people only look at rentals as a dollar. Now, are they going to hedge inflation? Yeah. Why? Well, the government's never going to quit printing money, as we know for now anyway. As long as the government prints dollars, your real estate's going to go up. It
Hmm.
is just the way it's going to be. And so when people are like, "Oh, well, this is better. This is a better," and we've gone through this, and people are like, real estate is really proven to be a winner. Well, the reason it's a winner is because your government can't quit printing, and regardless of interest rates, they're going to keep printing. You're going to have inflation. Well, it's just a matter of how much inflation each quarter, right? But I've realized that in creating this, I want to create a place where we have lots of great single family rentals with communities, with great people, and in investors who believe in that and are investing in these, even though they're investing passively, which is great because it gives them more time to do what they want to do, but it also gives them the ability to uh, create a community and work together for a greater cause.
So it sounds like what you're saying is in order for you to be able to go through the pain, because you said that pain, I would call it suffering, is the thing that we all need to feel like we're aspiring to something greater than ourselves, going through that suffering. And one thing that as you were speaking, I was thinking on that, yes, the suffering sucks, but you're suffering for a purpose. You're suffering for a goal, for the values, for the why that you want to see in the world. And I find that one of the biggest issues that I see with people is that their goal is the money, because they don't realize that money isn't the goal. Money is the great facilitator to whatever the goal actually is, whatever their why is, whatever their values are. And I think your time in the countryside has, or maybe just in time of your life, being away from all those distractions forced you to listen to your own inner wisdom to figure out what are my values, what is my why, what is enough, and now how do I use money to facilitate that? Where most people are so stuck in the right now. How do I just make money and I'll figure all that stuff out later? And they don't really realize that if you figure all that stuff out first, money just kind of flows in like energy.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, it does. I think, with what you're saying is accurate. I think, you can go on to any social media app, and everyone's telling you, buy into this, buy into that. This is the greatest thing. All these things. And it's disheartening because we have become a society that only focuses on money. And I think that is money. Once again, let's call it what it is, and what you called it earlier is what it is. It's energy. If I have $100 and I pay 10 people $10 to do 10 different projects, I basically utilize my energy to get them to do stuff that I think is going to be productive, and hopefully that'll bring energy back. Okay. And then I'll reuse the energy. um, we have got to, as a society, move past the world of just thinking about the dollar and thinking about the material with that dollar. One of the greatest pain points for me with this was the transition of a company that I had started in 2016 or early 2017, and then 2020 happened. The company was in manufacturing, and it was manufacturing in the US. But what had happened was when COVID hit, everything became astronomical in price to get to make it good. And I looked at my wife and I said, and we had some intellectual property along with it, right? But outside of that intellectual property, it was a phenomenal learning experience. But I looked at my wife one day. I had already been planning what I'm doing now in 2019 in a transition that I did not even know 2020 was going to happen. But it just, look, if you put yourself out there, things align. And I looked at her and I said, we got to walk away. We put years of work into this, Jen, and it's going to suck. And we have to do it. And I have this other plan, and I know it sounds crazy, and I know it sounds like we're never going to be able to do this. And I'm gonna all the equity that I have and money that I put away, I'm gonna put into this. And let's put it this way: we might be living out of a camper in a year. And I say that with just the most humbleness I can provide to your viewers. And I was living in a beautiful home in Colorado in 2020 when this all happened. I mean, I think the home was like just under $1 million, right? I was doing very well. Like I was living pretty well. And I was like, this is going to get ugly because we're going to close down shop on this. And all that work, all that money, all that went along with that, all the great people, obviously I still talk to them, but we're walking away. And that was an incredibly emotional, difficult situation because I looked at it as, holy shit, I just lost, 4 years and 3.5 years and all this work and just effort beyond what you can believe and suffrage through it. It was difficult, but it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me because through that suffering, I built this ability to just weather emotional storms like no other. And it just made me so much stronger. And Jen looked at me and she's like, go for it. We're going to risk it. I have 3 kids. I'm like, we're going to be living in a camper. Like, I'm serious. We're going to sell everything. And I'm putting everything into this. And I remember that it was almost a year later so it was 2021, and I had gotten an initial seed investment into it. And that seed investment was not huge, but it gave me the momentum to get going. And I remember I did not take a salary for a year and a half. I sold every asset that I had for almost a year and a half just to survive because I could not take any salary. And I did not know where the money was going to come from. I had no clue, no idea about any of it. It was just, honestly, it was a shot in the wind. And I met a guy on my team, Kevin, who's our CEO, and he's an awesome guy. And he has a lot of connection sets. And he through another person found out about this project, and he's like, hey, I think this is the right direction. I want to come in and help you build it out. And it was very early on. And I'm like, yeah, man, I could use another co-founder that's like, understands what we think the world's going to be like. And I remember, this is going to sound funny, but we sold the house. And I remember that, I was getting ready to, I've always been a watch collector. I've always loved watches, like since I was very, very young. And I built up a nice collection, and I was selling them one by one. I mean,
Whoa.
and along with other things, assets that I had to keep funding all this. This thing was like eating every dollar I had. And I remember we went through the initial capital investments with like 4 people. And I remember we got 4 of them to commit to the project, and we finished it up and they bought in. And I remember I took my first paycheck in a little over a year and a half. And I tell you what, man, I was like, I couldn't believe it. That amount, even though it wasn't a huge paycheck at the time, was like, I will never forget it. And I remember telling my wife, I'm like, I can't believe that we have just gone through this for going to be 2 years now to get to this point, and it was like anyway. So you know, the endurance and the pain and seeing people value in liking what you're doing and being able to utilize what you're doing and it creating a positive benefit for them has been the biggest reward of all by far.
Yeah.
Now, the biggest penalty for me has been the taxation of being a founder who did not take a salary for almost 2 years, who created and worked diligently every day to create something from nothing. And I finally got
It's
to a
almost like you're
point,
penalized for all
yeah,
your hard
not
work.
that long ago, where I could sell a small amount of my shares and just get penalized beyond what you could even imagine. And I've created 25 paid positions really overall. And yeah, that was a whole nother absolute, weathering of storms, piece too. So I always tell people that I think it just builds character and wisdom.
Yeah.
I heard someone not too long ago say, wisdom comes with age, and I'm like, I don't think that's accurate. I think wisdom comes with failures.
Yeah, I would say wisdom comes with reflection on your failures,
Yep.
reflection on the pain.
Yep.
Um, and I always heard that as you get older, you don't become more wise, you become more weary.
Yeah.
And that's why people think that they're wise, because they just don't want to do things more out of fear than out of wanting to do that. Now, have you ever heard of Joseph Campbell, Chris?
I don't think so, huh?
So Joseph Campbell is a American author, but he talks a lot about the power. He's wrote the book, The Power of Myth, and he talks about this journey. And as you're talking about your journey, I just see this journey. It's as we're on our little level, we know the world, and think of The Hobbit, think of Lord of the Rings, think of anything. We know the world as it is, and then at some point there's a call to action, and that was, and everyone we hit that call to action, everyone goes like, "No, I don't want to do it. I don't want to step onto the unknown. I don't want to step onto the path to Mordor, into the Jedi Alliance, whatever it is." And you were there when you were at 2019, getting ready to pass on, telling your wife, we need to do this. And in that moment, you step into the unknown. And the unknown is scary and it's painful. But at the bottom of the unknown, when you're going through that suffering, that's where you get the rebirth,
Yep.
where you become a new level of yourself. And then, of course, you go back on the journey to return home, but you never actually return home. Even when Bilbo returns back to the Shire, he's now at a different level above everyone else. And that doesn't mean that he gets to look down on them as if I'm better than you, but his mentally, he's come to a different place. He's seen the world for what it is and he's gotten better. And I think that's kind of the purpose of life, if there is a life, is to live. And to live is to go through these concentric circles, going down into the muck and then coming back up at a higher level over and over and over again. Recently, we had an investor who came on the podcast and he said something to me that really resonated. It's we as human beings have a moral obligation to take risk, calculated risk, but risk because that is that precipice, that is the unknown. And in that unknown, yes, we can go down into that depth and not come out, but the hero's journey is to come back out and then to go on and try to teach other people. So how do we get people, or from your estimation, because it sounds like you are on that path, how do you get people to stop trying to take the path of least resistance, to not go on that journey? Earlier today, before we got on this call, I have a coaching program that I do that I don't talk very often about on top of the podcast. Um, but it's a coaching program where I teach people how to become financially independent. I give them the path. Like, this is the path that you need to walk, and it's financial planning with purpose, so that they know that this is the path and I can fall off of it and they know how to get back on the path. And at the end of the call, the guy went, "Oh, I really thought you were just going to tell me like how to invest my money. That was going to work forever and like beat the market and then I'd be okay." And I got off the call pretty saddened for him, because in my sales call, I say, this is effort, this is work. You are going to fall into the unknown. But I promise you, when you get back with my guidance, you'll be able to attain to a higher level. And he was like, I don't want to do that. I'm looking for the easy thing. I don't want to have to do stuff. How do you get people to show that like doing stuff, suffering, working is the path, that without it, you actually go nowhere. And even if you do attain it, like by winning the lottery, you're going to blow it anyways.
Yeah. So I think that we have to recognize that the world around us is not an easy place to live in. It doesn't matter how little money you have or how much money you have. It's inherently difficult. Why? Because it's full of challenges. Now, you might look outside and go, oh, there's no challenges. And what we've done is we've created this amazing system of people who have worked together to create all these things. Now, in the essence and the basis of them, all these things were great in the beginning. It made life easier. But you always get to a trajectory where you hit a peak. And you hit that peak and you start to move towards a trough, right? The bottom. And where we're at now, I believe, is a place where we've been taught to take the easy road. Our parents, not all of them, but a good majority of them, we always think to ourselves when we have kids, we want to make their lives easier. My boys, and I don't have to say for my daughter because my wife deals with my daughter most of the time and she's phenomenal. She's very easy. Gosh, my daughter's 3.5 and she's so self-sufficient. I'm like, if I could get my boys to be this self-sufficient at 30, it'll be a miracle. But, they are always like, oh, Dad, you're not fun enough. You don't do this. And I tell them, I'm like, my job isn't to be fun. Like, at the end of the day, like, I'm sorry, but I love you. I'll give you the best guidance I can. But you're going to go out there and you're going to get kicked in the face. And you better get kicked in the face a dozen more times. And you better be willing to take that. Because if you run from it, that fight's still coming to you, whether you want it or not. And so what we do is we put, I think it was, and when I say this, we, is because prior to, and I won't get into it, prior to really 9 years ago, I lived a very much mainstream, work for a corporation, do all these things, and I tried to make my life as normal as possible, middle class, do what I'm supposed to, have my weekends off, do all these things, and what I realized is I was not serving anyone except myself. I wasn't serving my company because I wasn't that engaged with my company.
You didn't care. It was just a paycheck.
I did what I
I've been
needed
there.
to do. It was a paycheck. My life didn't depend on that paycheck. Someone who built the company at one point did. And so I was only serving myself. And what you realize is if you take the path of least resistance, you're only serving yourself. And if you're only serving yourself, then you're destroying the point of energy. The point of energy is for us to work together to serve one another. And I think that's one of the missing combinations is if you think about this, if people on your podcast just think about this. If you were to take everybody's time and the amount of energy that they put in on one day on social media, think about that on a global scale. One person for 2 hours or 3 hours a day times, let's say, 5 billion people. Do the mathematical equation there. Do you know how much energy that social media just stole from you for free? It's absolutely amazing. Now, I'm not saying that there's not positive outlets on social media. There are. This podcast, there's many other things that are positive. But what we've gotten to is a point where people are more likely to feed into a negative source through social media than a positive. Because once again, negative is the path of least resistance. It's easy. Positive is a path of going up the mountain. And I say that because when I went through my transition, I was always a risk taker, but I was not managing my risk in the best way. I wasn't using that ability in the best way to express who I could be and how I could benefit others. And so what I had to do is I went through this process about 9 years ago where I walked away from it all. I had to. I let it all go. I lost it all. I had to walk away. And I spent an entire year and a half hiking every 14er that I could find in Colorado, Wyoming. I mean, I was everywhere, right? I was just on mountains as much as I could. Winter, summer, it did not matter. I can't tell you how many mountains I've been on at 13,000, 14,000 feet where blizzards have come in. And I didn't even know how I was going to find my way down. But I did. And I think it taught me that struggle is real. paving your own path is going to give you more pain, but it's going to give you reward that is far beyond the dollar. And that is a key piece, is when people realize that, hey, the money, when people are productive to the world and want to help the world, yes, a lot of them are very wealthy. That's a byproduct of them trying to give everything they can to the world. And what you find out is most of those people, they don't have everything that they may have lots of wealth. That doesn't mean that they have to have every material thing on the planet. A lot of them are just looking of how they can utilize that money to help other people. And that's how I look at like my investors. A lot of them have done very well. They're great people. Some of them, I only know it like a phone call's length. That they've been some of the most supportive, amazing people, indirectly and directly, in my entire life. And they've done well because they want to help. They want to see other people succeed. And we live in a culture that even though we say that, we hide behind the shadows and we're like, oh, I hope they don't succeed because he's going to do something that I can't do. Well, guess what? You
Yeah.
can do something, but you got to make a decision. And if you want the easiest path of resistance, it's going to be a negative flow. If you want the greatest path of resistance, it's going to be a positive flow. And that's just how it works. I think we have a tendency to overcomplicate everything in the world. And it's just, we have to look at it very clearly. You have a choice. Do you want to fall into a least path of resistance, which is going to be darkness in a place that is not going to really suit you? Or do you want to move into a positive light, a great path of resistance that's going to help you become the person that you need to be for not only you, but more importantly, the people around you? And man, it's been an absolute changer for my entire life. When I was working for somebody, I wanted to have all the fancy shit too. I wanted all this shit. But what I had to realize was you have to lose it all. You have to shed all these skins and you have to go through a lot of pain and suffering. And it's, hey, look, sometimes things aren't as clear in the beginning. I mean, it could take you 2 or 3 years before you get some clarity, but that's because you have 20 or 30 years of baggage that you have to find a way out of. And the system wants you to have more baggage so that way you can't find your way out of it. Because if you
Yeah.
can't find your way out of it, you're stuck in it. You're never going to break free. And so that goes right back to investing and being smart about how you invest and being, working to make sure that, frankly, the universe is on your side, and the universe is going to be on your side in your investments if you're helping others. If you're not, it's a coin toss in my world.
Yeah. As you were talking, I kept on getting goosebumps remembering back to my past because you and I both went, Chris, through very similar journeys to come to the realization that I think we both share, and that the most important thing is helping others, is trying to take this human consciousness and move it, and that we plant trees for the shade that we will never sit underneath. We're constantly trying to make the world a bit better, but unfortunately we're in a world, and I it's my goal to change it. I don't know how. That there's the easiest way to build the tallest building in New York is to tear all the other buildings down. The harder way is to build the tallest building. But we're in a world that seems to be getting worse and worse in trying to tear everyone else down, because by you succeeding, Chris, that means that me, Chris, is a failure. You're better than me means that I somehow failed, where in truth, you're doing good and my doing good are two completely unrelated things. So my goal in 2025 is try to figure out what is enough. And that's been my goal in trying to figure that out, because it's such a loose term and everyone's enoughness is completely different, and it differs from thing to thing to thing. And we'll get back to that in a second, but I do want to talk about Real Bricks and give you a chance to share
Yeah,
your
sure.
platform with
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. I mean, Real Bricks was, is a technology that I worked to create that is basically a place where people can invest in assets and get return on them and get appreciation. It's a web app, and it's also, you can get it on iOS and Android. Um, and really, what it is it was a build out a technology that I believe will be built on in multiple layers. And when I took this, when I told my wife that I was going to do this and she supported me on it, I want to do this and I don't want to be emotionally attached to it. I want to be able to gift it in whatever way that is to the world, and move on, right? And build something else. I haven't got to that point yet, but I believe I will. And I think when we think about things, we think about how do we build something of value for the people around us, even the people we don't know, more importantly, right? Because what I've
Hmm.
realized is some of the closest people to me are people that wouldn't invest anything, and people I don't even know have invested in my company and me. Once again, right? It's very odd how that is. Um, but basically, what the technology allows is for, let's say, there's a company that has a build to rent company that has a large amount of assets. They can bring those assets into the platform and allow everyday people to invest in those assets. They can manage those assets and return ROI to those investors. Literally, it happens. They just type in how much money each rental makes year end, quarterly, whatever, and it literally gets distributed to everybody's account. There's no you know
Wow.
and we created it
And
so
there's no
that way.
middleman taking anything, or
Yeah. So
wow.
what they would do is, like, let's just say 123 Main Street, right? They take that and they maybe it has a 7 or 8% yield every quarter. They put in that amount, whatever that is, and it gets distributed based on how many shares you have in that property. So let's say, Chris, you go on and you want to buy 10 shares, and they're $10 a share in this particular property. You're going to, maybe the dividend is 24 cents per share. You're going to get 24 cents for every share every quarter, right? Or whatever that is. It's going to adjust according to that. But essentially, that's the technology that I've created, and I've worked with my team to create it in a capacity where it's obviously compliant with the Securities Exchange. And then
Yeah.
the other piece of it is we created a secondary market. So maybe, Chris, down the road, you're like, hey, I'm going to sell these shares. I want to liquidate and get my money out and move into something else or whatever it is. You'll have that ability to do that. So that technology, as far as from a real estate platform, where it's all done just digitally swiping, is very unknown, and especially with a secondary market. Like, there's some that you can, a couple of companies you can invest to, but you're sitting in it for 5 to 7 years. You have no exit ability. You have no nothing. And if it, you may or may not get dividends. It just depends. Where the way we see it is, every asset is its own asset, whether it's one, two,
Hmm.
three main or 3, 4, 5 main or whatever it may be. And that way you can spread your money out amongst multiple assets instead of having it in, say, a real estate fund or a REIT, where maybe 5 of the assets are performing and 3 of them aren't, and it's pulling those down. You can adjust to what fits you. And if an asset's underperforming in your mind, you can sell it to another user who may be like, hey, I'm going to buy into this one. And you can, and that's really the philosophy of it.
That's amazing. It sounds like you have that ability to have the liquidity that a REIT has, and you have the ability of private equity to be able to purchase what you actually want. Because most times with private equity, now you're in a lockup period for God knows how many years till the project even starts. So typically, I'll say 10 to 12, and your money's locked up, and you have zero liquidity for that time. So
Yep.
you've been able to merge these two things into one, giving people the ability to move and be nimble as the world changes.
Yeah, I feel like we create these tools, and we let people use the tools to their what fits them. And I think that that is the way that I've always seen it, as far as what I'm working on, and I knew that there was going to be a need for it. I also knew that there would be a potential that we would see a lot more build to rent communities. And I do believe that's going to happen as we go into the future. Now, a lot of people might be like, oh, we don't want that because we need to, the American dream is to buy a home and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But we can just cut through the crap, which is, most homes are owned by the bank. You have a note on them. You're paying a monthly payment, all these different things. You pay all these taxes. It goes on and on and on. Your insurance continues to go up. At what point do we look to things and go, is our time helping and creating things more valuable? Our time is more valuable. So even though maybe people are like, oh, well, you're a renter, and you know that, right? Like, people, oh, But the younger generations are like, I don't care if I'm renting. Like, I want my
Hmm.
time. I want to go snowboarding. I want to mountain bike. I want to, travel. Well, this is a
Yeah, we
great
only
way
know
for
we
you
get
to,
this one life.
yeah,
Like,
where
let's live
you
it.
can invest in all these different real estate assets and let your portfolio grow and appreciate. And down the road, when you go to sell, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road on the secondary, maybe you're like, oh, it's been in there for 3 years, I'm going to sell it, whatever it is. There's a likely probability that the value of that asset's gone up, and so you're going to catch that as well as the quarterly dividend. So it's really, the idea is that it just creates a place where people have more time to do what they want to do, but still be investors in real estate. And they are on the cap table of the assets. So, I mean, it's, you're an owner. I do believe down the road we'll see lending on these assets. We're going to see a whole entire system build out in this world of this. Right now, where we're at is, and where we've been at is a place where it's been AI, cryptocurrency, cryptocurrency, cryptocurrency. And everyone's just focused on AI and cryptocurrency, right? But what do we know is going to happen in the future to a high probability? With the introduction of AI and the growth of machine learning and AI intelligence, it's going to be a drawback in jobs. If there's a drawback in jobs, and when I say drawback in jobs, I'm talking upper
Substantial.
paid jobs. Who's going to buy homes? What bank is going to loan on all these homes, right? We're going to see a shift in the next decade. And if I'm right, have me back on. And if I'm wrong, have me back on. I mean, I could very well be wrong, but I don't believe I'm wrong here. I believe that we are going to see a mass drawback of high paying careers.
I agree.
And because of that, we're going to see a shift into a lot of people that are going to be like, you know what? I'm a renter, but it's not going to be a 1 year lease. It's going to be like a 5 year, a 10 year lease. And you may one day be leasing out a home that you're actually investing in on our platform. So you are getting some of that, right? The world has to change, and we have to be willing to change with it. And we also have to realize one of the things I think people get so caught up on is ownership. They're like, oh, I own this, I own this, I own it. One of the greatest things that has helped me in investing, that has helped me in taking risk, is realizing that I actually don't own anything. It doesn't matter if it's paid off or not. I don't own it. This globe owns it. I don't
Yep.
own it. If something happened, everything can be taken away. I mean, I could have a tornado, God forbid, blow through this property and this home's gone. This is the reality. All you have is your mind, your body, and the action that you're willing to take. That's it. And if you can put yourself in a place where you're like, it doesn't matter if I have zero or $250 billion, I'm still me, and I'm still
Yeah.
going to fight. And if you're willing to fight every day, you are going to be happy. If you're willing to take risk every day, you will find happiness in that. Because really, a world of just having everything you want is just a world of dopamine. It's you're gonna pay the price. My wife always refers to it as the human dopamine drip. She'll
Hmm.
always tell me, control your dopamine drip every day. If you have too much, you're going to go into a dark place. If you have too little, it's super painful. But if you can find a place where you don't have to have too much and you have just enough, I believe there is a level of existence there that you can really work in and really see the bigger picture in life and every objective that you take on. I don't even know how to explain that, but yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think that many people, when they hear about dopamine, they think that dopamine is the reward molecule. But dopamine, from a neurological standpoint, is actually the seeking molecule. It tells your brain to continue to get this so that you get something good. And I think the issue with like social media, especially, is that it gives you that dopamine, but you never actually attain it. You have to go through it, to go through the hard work to attain the thing and add it into your schema, into your mind. I've always heard this quote that I've always liked. It's, you can never get enough of something that isn't working. And that's how it is with social media. You constantly try feeling like I'm almost there, I've almost filled it up, but it's never going to get there. There's always going to be that little percentage because you're never seeking, you're not growing. Now, I want to be respectful of your time, but
Oh, you're good. You're
you and
good.
I have you and I have such a similar thought process on the role of suffering in life, the role of growth, the role of trying to be part of a bigger whole. My goal in life is to get money out of the way so people can start to focus on what really matters. I think that too many people think that money is the end goal. When I've realized, and it sounds like you have, money is just the means to the end goal. And that end goal is different for everybody. From you and I, it sounds like it's moving humanity into a better tomorrow and constantly growth, all that kind of stuff. And I'm having a lot of trouble because I think it's a mindset problem and people don't want to change their mind because they feel that they're in their final form and that neuroplasticity is impossible because they are who they are. Can you think of a way to like get people to red pill and get out of the fucking matrix? Because they're stuck in the matrix and I don't know how to show people that they are.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, I think. Well, you have to be willing to go through the pain. That's the first thing, and you have to be willing to go through ridicule. I've always prided myself on my humility and humbleness, and I know a lot of people, they give me crap because they're like, "You live in Nebraska? What the hell are you living in Nebraska for? You know, are there a bunch of rednecks out there?" It's so funny. And I tell people, I'm like, let me tell you something. There's not a state like this state. I've been all over. Some of the most humble people you will ever meet live right here. If your car's broke down, they're helping you, and they're helping you to a degree where they're almost annoying. Um, if you need something, they're there. Uh, they are just Nebraskans, and I'm not saying that other states aren't like this, but I've been in a lot of states. I've spent a lot of time in the U.S. traveling around, going to all these different places. I think Texas has a lot of that too, but they're very
Mm-hmm.
humble here, and they're very okay with not having everything. It's very interesting. They're very much like nuclear family oriented, and very much like, hey, I don't have to have the biggest house. I don't have to have the fanciest car. I don't have to have any of this stuff. I just love to be a benefit to my community and to go out and work hard every day. And I think growing up in Nebraska as a young man, and my mother used to make me go out to this gentleman. I'll tell you, he's a physician. He's retired now, but he worked with my mother in the hospital in oncology, and she's a provider. And she would make me go out every summer and work on his property. And he had these Clydesdales that were like, he never used them, or, for what they're supposed to be used for. They're draft horses, um, but I'd have to go out there and help take care of them and do all this stuff. And I would get paid. I would work 8 hours a day, and I would get paid $20 a day. So whatever that ends up being. And I remember the day I graduated high school, um, he needed to have some work done. And I told my mother, I'm like, I'm not going out. I'm done. I'm graduating. I'm done. Right. And she's like, you better get out there and get that done and help him get it done. And I remember going out there and I was out there for all my friends were having a good old time and I'm out there working. And I think what it just taught me a lot of humility and a lot of humbleness. And I think that's been very good for me. I think especially in the world of technology, where a lot of times we let our brain get ahead of us and we kind of forget about the human element. And I think it's kept me very grounded um, with that. So I think people have to be willing to uproot themselves, willing to move. you have to be willing to be ridiculed, because everyone around you is going to tell you you're an idiot. And it's
Mhm.
okay. Maybe you are. I'm sure people tell me I'm an idiot all the time too. Maybe I
Or
am.
maybe they just want you to fail so that you won't go above them. Maybe they're trying to stop you because they realize that they could do that too.
And that's
You know,
probably more likely what it is.
I've
But
always said that things like you were talking about there, like gratitude and things like understanding that compassion for other people, they don't put you on top of the mountain, but they help you walk up the hill. Those two things are what help you walk up the hill. That humility to know that, yes, I am perfect just the way I am, and I'm not in my final form. And
yep,
those two things are simultaneously true. That you're perfect the way you are, and you can be better.
yeah. Life should be about growth. Life should not be about, hey, I know that we've been told this in the system. You brought up the matrix. We've been told this that, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, and this, and this is your pathway to success. Well, what we've realized is I'm 42 and my wife's 32, and I can tell you what she's realized. She's telling me all the time. She's like, I was lied to. Man, I got ripped off. I went through college and realized that it was just a total ripoff. And all I did was like waste time and all this stuff, right? And I'm not saying, don't go to college or anything, but I'm just calling the reality of for many what it probably is. And what I see is I tell my boys all the time, I'm like, your job is to go out there, be the best person you can be, help out whoever needs help. Look, you may get burned a few times. It's going to happen. The key is if you get burned by someone, don't think that they're not going to burn you a second time. But that does not mean you should not take the risk of being burned. Because sometimes you might get burned 5 times, but you may help someone to a greater degree than you ever realized. And instead of us working in a culture where, and I think corporations have a tendency to do this. So in my company, I always talk about succession planning. We work together. I mean, I have a great team. They're amazing people. And I'm like, we work together to create and build, and we're there. I'm like, I tell them all the time, all the meetings every week. If you fail to help your partner out, you're failing yourself. You're failing the company and you're failing everybody involved in this project. You cannot do that. We can't have weakest links here. We have to all fight every day like it's our last day. And I think that in my mind, even when I've had massive wins financially, I go back to the great to Ray Dalio. He said if you're not worried, you should be, and if you're worried, you shouldn't be. And I think that has a lot of accuracy. So even no matter how good I think things are, I'm always like, there's something around the corner here. We got to look around, and that's just that constant evolving fight that is always there. And I think with the sooner we realize that this fight is not going away, and I can't even tell you that in your afterlife, and some people don't believe in that this fight is going away. Because I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe the evolution of us in physical form, and I do believe in spirit and soul. I believe in the soul, right? I do believe that even in that evolution beyond the physical form here, there's always a fight to advance who we are spiritually, mentally, and maybe it won't be mentally. I don't know. I don't know that world yet, but I do believe that people have got to just stop battling amongst each other and walk outside and go, hey, what the blank can I do to make your day better? When you walk into a coffee shop or you walk into give those people the best part of you that you possibly can. I don't care if they're making $8 an hour or 800,000 a year. Everybody deserves the same gratitude and the same, you give them the best you can every time, even though it's hard. I mean, I had an experience in Target a week ago where like one of their employees was, I don't know what was going on mentally, but it was not okay. And my wife and I are like, what is going on? And I, the guy was so nasty. And I told him, I said, hey, look, have a great day. If someone throws negativity at you, take it as an opportunity to digest that negativity and throw it back out positive. And what you will realize is people, they'll try to come at you real hard with their negativity. But if you can find a way to find a common ground and just say, you know what? I'm not going to let my arrogance get the best of me. I'm not going to let my aggression or my, how could you talk to me this way get the best of me. I'm going to take it in. I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to regurgitate it, positivity out. Because what we'll see in social media is regurgitation of negative content over. And guess what? I tell your listeners, like I tell anyone, what I've realized in building things, and some have been successful and some have failed, is you put out that negativity that you see, all the stuff that's happening is not going to impact you necessarily. You
Unless you
have
choose
to,
it to.
yeah, unless you choose to have it impact you, right? I think that's really hard for people, and they don't want to move because they would rather bitch and complain and not make a move because they're worried about what everyone else is going to say. If you're worried about what everyone else is going to say, you are going to end up in a place one day where you're looking back at your life, I swear, going, I didn't challenge myself anywhere. And it's just like a muscle. If you don't work it, it's going away. Endurance. If you don't work on it, it's going away. You got to eat healthy. You got to keep your mind healthy. That'll help you to invest in things in a healthy manner and take risk and know and have faith that you're going to be fine and that these investments or whatever they are that you're doing, investments in yourself, investments financially will pay off.
It was Viktor Frankl who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor, went through some of the most arduous things a human being could endure. And he wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a gap. So between the target person yelling at you for no reason and between you responding back in visceral anger, you have the gap to take that moment and realize, how do I want to respond? Because no one can actually do anything to you or can say anything to you that can harm you unless you choose to allow it to harm you. You could go up to Warren Buffett and say, hey, you're poor. That won't even touch him because he knows to his core that is not true. But you could probably go to him and say, you were not a good father. And that would probably really get to him. Because if you look at the autobiographies, it seems that is the way. So as you go through life, remember that between stimulus response, there's a gap. And in that gap is you. Nothing can hurt you until someone physically hurts you. And even in that suffering, you can make meaning out of it to become a better person. Now, Chris, I know that we have time. Do you have time for one more question on my behalf?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said earlier, 2025, my goal is to look at this concept of enoughness. What is enough in terms of myself subjectively? What is enough objectively? What is enough comparatively? What is enough intersubjectively? So what we find as the FI guys, it's the financial independence guys, that financial independence means something very different to everybody. So Chris, what does financial independence mean to you? More specifically, what is enough?
I think any male or female who has innate drive to succeed in whatever that may be. Success is not all monetary. If we know this, if you've been down this road, you know this for a fact. I think if I was to dissipate from the earth today, I would leave knowing that it's been enough. So I don't know how to put that in the perfect words because it's kind of an emotional thing for me. But I look at my kids. I've fought tooth and nail for them. I've fought tooth and nail for my wife, my family, my mother and father-in-law who've been amazing, and the people that have invested in me, that have surrounded me, and the people that I don't even know that invested in my platform that I don't know that have supported me. I feel that enough is the willingness to take action every day, whether you end that particular night on what you perceive as a fail or a win. The fact that you get up and you show up and you take action, that is enough in my world. Take all the money out of it, because you could stack your bank account And, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to have enough, because enough is a mindset. It's not a dollar amount. I believe people should invest their energy into productive things. So, like what we're doing, rentals, homes, whatever, building a greater place for us, right? For the people after us. I believe in investments, in taking those risks, and by doing that, you're improving other people's lives and worlds. That is enough. Take the dollars out of it. Um, that's truly what I feel like. I feel like every day I get up, and there's a lot of days. I mean, I get up and I'm like, dude, I feel like I've just gotten the living shit kicked out of me for 2 weeks, and I haven't had a win in six. There's times where I feel like I haven't had wins for 6 months, and my wife will
Yeah.
always go, Chris, you're missing all the little wins along the way because you're so focused on the big target, right? It's
Yeah.
like
And if you don't look at
going to
those,
hunt buffalo, but you're eating rabbits and stuff along the way, and you're still good. But in your mind, you're starving, and you have to get to this buffalo, right? I don't know how to equate that, but
I would say you have this big goal, right? And until you hit that big goal, you're a failure along the way, not realizing that every step is taking you closer to that big goal. Every step is a win in itself to
yeah,
get you to the big goal. So without breaking that goal down, it seems as if we're failing. Like if my goal was to save $1 million this year, I'm a failure until I've done that. That doesn't mean that I failed when I made 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. You have to break that down into smaller things.
well, and I think people have this idea that wealth is made overnight, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really a look.
Dangerous.
It's a dangerous path, because even if you won $10 million gambling, you're going to lose it overnight. If you've won it overnight, you will lose it overnight. And what you have to realize is investing is a long-term goal set, and put it out there of what do you where do you see yourself, and and don't always correlate it to every dollar. Think about how those dollars that you will create are going to impact other people around you and yourself in a positive way. And I think that is really where people will create revenues that they never even thought possible, because even with AI and all these jobs going, that's going to create a whole world of possibilities. And I think, with some regulation change and maybe some tax code changes in the future, I think that we can open up and unlock a world of possibilities with people's minds that we never even thought possible. We've kind of been pigeonholed to believe that AI is it and we're all dead. It's like, no, it's just not how it's going to work. Like, humanity has gotten along for how many civilizations have we dug up? We're still here, right? So
Yeah.
we can't ever. And one thing I will say before this is done is, I used to tell myself I'm too old. I remember when I made that transitional change that was so important in my life. I was 33, and um, what I realized was, one day I woke up and I said, Chris, I'm not getting younger. I'm going to be 50 years old no matter what. So I better be 50 years old looking back and going, I did something with my life that was productive. And I don't care what anyone else said along the way. I know, in my heart, that it was productive, and the people around me know it was. And that's it. At the end of the day, it's just you. And so I think if people can get their mind wrapped around that and realize that, hey, the first step is the hardest. It's action. It's action. It's the first step. Get off your ass. Get off the social media. I always look for social media. Sometimes I'll look at I love to listen to podcasts and stuff, just as a positive thing where I'm like, hey, I know you have to kind of find a way to where it gears into what you're doing, which is, I'm going to find a way to succeed. I'm going to find a way to map this out. And I've had a lot of people tell me that are close to me and go, oh, Chris, well, not everyone can just come up with ideas and turn them into businesses like you. Not everyone can. I mean, I have been hit with that so many times where I'm like, bullshit. Yeah, you can. You choose not to. This is a
Yeah, because they
choice.
have the fear to start,
Yeah, this is a
the
choice.
fear to fail.
The fear to fail. And the best thing in the world for people, in the greatest minds in the world, have failed over and over. And hell, it's part of the process. That's how you, like we said, you gain wisdom through failure and reflection of these things. There's no guarantees in life. Wake up and know there's no guarantee. So if you know there's no guarantee in financial, there's no guarantee that you're going to live tomorrow, there's no guarantee that everyone's going to love you, there's no guarantee about any of it. Just recognize it and know that the only guarantee there is that you're either going to take action or you're not going to take action. That's it. And if you're not taking action, you're going to pay the price. I don't care. You're paying the price now, and you will continue to pay the price.
So, Chris, I'm a jujitsu instructor. It's none of the things that I do. And I always ask people who don't know anything about it, like, what do you think the hardest belt is to attain? And most people say, well, probably your black belt, right? And I always say, no, it's your white belt. Because it is hard to take that first step, to walk into a room of people that you don't know, all wearing different belts, different gis, maybe they're no gi, and to submit yourself to them to legitimately do the scariest thing that human beings can do, try to kill one another. The goal of jiu-jitsu is to dismember or incapacitate your opponent to the point that they need to either stop or die. Mm-hmm. What you're talking about makes me realize how important it is to go through that fire, to go through that growth, to come to a point of enoughness. You mentioned when you were saying what is enough, that if you were to die today, that you felt that you were enough. And that is what I'm trying to get to, is to feel that inner feeling that I am enough, because I know I have enough subjectively or objectively, but I don't feel that I am enough right now. So I hope, Chris, that we can remain friends, and that that you maybe guide me to getting to that point. That is my goal, to not just say the words, but actually feel them and have that feeling, that knowledge that you are enough. I think that should be everyone's goal, because at that point, the only thing we all have in common is that we will all die. Change is inevitable. And if you can get to your deathbed with probably regrets, but also knowing that you did your damnedest, that you were enough the entire time, I think that could be it. That could make
Yeah.
a life worth living.
Yeah. I feel very, very blessed, regardless of all these crazy things that I've had an opportunity to be involved in. And even being on, you let me on your podcast, like, I'm grateful for it. I mean, anytime that I can try to help people, I truly do. And, I want to see people grow. I want to see people take risk. I want to see people change their life. I did it. I'm continuing to do it. It's an evolution. I don't believe that in 20 years I'm going to be exactly the way I am today. I'm going to go, man, what was I doing then? It's an
You would
evolution.
hope not.
But I think at the same time, I know every day that I give it the best I can, that is a success, even if externally it may look like a loss. So,
Thank you.
Chris, I'm around if you ever want to hop on another call, whatever, man. And if I can be of any benefit to your listeners or you just let me know. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, if I'm not doing anything productive with my time to help others, then I'm not. I'm just flat out not using my time wisely, I think so. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Chris. And thank you for being so generous to both myself and our audience members. I'd like to try to share that in reciprocity and give the platform to you to share with our audience members where they can find you, where they can learn more about Real Bricks. And of course, if you provide me the information, I could put it in the show notes.
Yeah. It's just realbricks.com, Real Bricks. And then the app is under Real Bricks as well. I urge people to take the first step. And, hey, if the first step is just changing your habits, then whatever. But if your first step is to take a risk on an investment that has to do with real estate, then maybe, hey, you can buy in at $100. You can put in 100, you can put in 10 grand, whatever you want to do. But the point is you have to start somewhere, and you might as well start now, because this world is going to move along real quick with or without you making those steps. And I just look back and I'm incredibly grateful, well beyond any wealth that I have created, obtained, anything, in the fact that I took those steps that day. That I remember that day very clearly, when I said, I'm changing every habit that I have starting now. And I did. And I think what I've realized is I continually have to redirect myself when I find myself going to old habits, man, because
Yeah.
you will find yourself doing them. And you've got to find a way to be like, hey, I'm doing this and I got to stop right now. And I've got to take action in the other direction, or I'm going to end up in the same place that I was 10 years ago, which is not a place I want to be.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing that once you find that moment of transcendence and you think like I've reached it, and then you immediately start falling off because it's a balance of trying to stay on top of that hill, on top of that needle's razor's edge.
it's like a
Chris,
tightrope.
thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. This was one of my favorite conversations I've got to have with somebody. So thank you for being so
Yeah.
open and honest and real with us. For our audience members, please like, subscribe, and most importantly, share the Fi Guys with another person. Bring someone along for this journey of financial independence because, like Chris and I spoke about today, it's hard. It's going to be long. You're not going to get there quickly. And the best way, or if you want to get somewhere fast, go alone. But if you want to get there, if you want to go far, go together. And this journey of financial independence, of finding what enoughness is not a fast one. It needs to be done arduously with time and with another person. As you fall, they can help pick you back up.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much
Hey,
today.
appreciate it.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.